What's up, everybody? This is Charlie Potter, senior team writer of BamaOnLine.com, back with another BOL Basketball Show. It's the postseason, boys. We're going to be up in Nashville for the SEC tournament this week. Blake's already there. He got a foreign background behind him, so I know he's looking forward to a Thursday full of basketball. And, for clarity's sake, we're going to be recording this before we find out who Alabama's going to be playing on Friday night in that late game up in Nashville. But it's either going to be Kentucky and Oklahoma, and we're going to get to that a little bit later. But first, guys, I want to talk about that Iron Bowl basketball round 2. Blake and I were there in Neville Arena. It was a classic. It was a great game. We heard from Nate Oates after the game. I think Nate's big point was, hey, this was a game that mattered to both teams. I think we wondered that going into it a little bit, just with Auburn already locking up the regular season championship and the number 1 seed in the SEC tournament, if maybe they would rest some guys to get them ready for March. But we saw everybody for a little bit, at least. We saw some guys have to leave the game, but that was for different reasons. We might get into that a little. But Tim, when you look at that game at Neville Arena, a 93-91 overtime win for Alabama, Mark Sears winning at the buzzer, just what sticks out to you the most?
I mean, it's just a classic game, right? I was thinking, if you look at the top college basketball games this year, Alabama's got 3 of the best: Houston, Tennessee, and Auburn. I mean, unbelievable game set up. And there's no doubt, I don't want to hear Denver Jones was hobbled for 38 minutes guarding Mark Sears. You got to save that and go somewhere else for that. Just like that's right along the lines of, it was retaliation while I elbowed him in his spine at the base of his neck. It's a lot of retaliation happening there. And, let's get to that right there. What was so weird about
Go ahead.
Is he went straight to his back. The elbow in the back, the forearm in the back, that's the retaliation. Then when you hit him in the back of the head by the spine, that's the felony. I mean, I saw a girl in track right now getting charged for hitting somebody with a baton. But obviously, I thought the game was great. Other than that did happen, Blake. She hit her in the head running the 4x400.
I saw it. I saw the.
She's
clip.
like, she said it was an accident, by the way.
Crazy.
Anyways, not to distract. Great game. I thought it was heated. Grant with the crane. I'm surprised he didn't get teched up, honestly. I thought the big man in this were amazing on both sides. Johnny Broome is amazing. He should be National Player of the Year, I think, over Cooper Flagg, considering what he's done and who he does it against. Grant hogs a lot of the attention for the great performance he had, and he should. But Cliff was fired up. There was a lot of pound in his chest early on. You saw it from Aiden. You saw it from Mo. You saw it from Caldwell on their end. It was a big man showcase in many ways. I'm not sure I expected that going in, but just fantastic play. Pettiford, gosh, that guy was crazy good in that game. Another really great freshman. This league's just, top to bottom so talented. But to end it that way, and for it to mean a lot, because it would have, if you bench, you said a couple of guys in that game, it doesn't mean as much. You'd say we rested Denver Jones. He's a great player. He held Mark to another low total, but he played 38 minutes. He's not hobbled. He played 38 minutes, had 9.6 assists. So just an unbelievable game. And there's a lot of drama at the end of the game, but when I went back and watched it, that handshake line in both games, after both Alabama and Auburn games, was a lot of love. There was a lot of respect. There's a lot of hugs. There wasn't any animosity. So I think the players understood what they had done and what a great game it was.
Yeah, I didn't realize you were going to come out so heated. I would have thrown it over the plate a little slower and let you just completely knock it out.
I have not talked about it at all, but I was just surprised to hear. I mean, you know what I mean? Dennis Robbins was retaliating a lot. You know what I mean? Draymond Green's sometimes you play tough and you play rough, and that guy's a good basketball player. That's a big loss for them.
It was, but I don't think that's anything new for Chad Baker-Mazara either. I even saw jokes. You're talking about the girl running the relay. I saw people saying that might be his sister, just because that's the reputation that he has. So,
and for those that haven't seen, there is a track race with the baton, 4x400, 4x100, and a girl passes another girl, and she just takes the baton and conks her on the head.
Mm-hmm.
Like just straight, and then went and said it was an accident because her elbow got caught up and made her. Yeah, they charged her this morning though. So just for the reference, but they were making a lot of comparisons there. I'm sorry, Blake, I've hogged a lot of your segment.
You're good. They used to teach us to keep swinging that arm around for the baton. If you miss, just keep swinging it. So luckily it was just a one hit under. But no, it was a game that there was the intensity was high, let's say that. And that's what you expect in a rivalry game. And Blake and I talked about it up in the the rafters where we were sitting just about Chris Youngblood and how he wasn't really there for some of that stuff. And obviously we saw Baker Mazar and Youngblood link up a few times, and then it ended up with with Baker Mazar getting ejected from the game for that flagrant 2. But what did you think just of the game itself, Blake, the intensity, and really ultimately how it shaped out?
I mean, where do you even start? I mean, if you're Tim, you start with the elbow. But I don't even. There was a lot of things that happened in this game. I think first and foremost, it shows you again how good this rivalry is, and how you again have these two teams, and they're both really good this year. You have a top 10, top 8 game on the road, and it comes down to overtime. It comes down to a game-winning shot at the buzzer. Like, it's just another chapter in this rivalry that's become, I think, over the last 5 years, the best in college basketball. So it was great to see. And I think the biggest thing for me was, I know we're going to get to Grant Nelson, but just kind of like you mentioned, Tim, the bigs in general. Alabama's guards did not particularly have great games in this one. Sears had 5 points going into overtime. Holloway had, I think, 5 for the game. And so he hasn't been playing super well the last 2 games. Youngblood was okay, but he also didn't shoot the ball a ton and only made the 1 3. LeBaron Philon was really good. But like across the board, usually Alabama's scoring is coming from those 4 guys mostly, especially Mark Sears. And for him to, if you told me before the game Mark Sears would have 5 points at the end of regulation, I'd say Bama lost by 15 or 20 points, honestly. But you got a ton of production from the bigs, and it wasn't just Grant Nelson, but he did have a really good game. You had Cliff Amore was great. I think he was perfect from the field. He had, 12, 13 points, something like that. Aiden Sherrill was really good coming in for Cliff, which let you kind of go 5-man for 5-man. You kind of traded out centers, so Alabama didn't have to go small, which was big against Auburn's size. I think that helped them a lot. And then on top of that, you got some good takes out of Jaron Stevenson. He didn't score a ton, but he looked strong attacking the basket. Like, you had all of the bigs decide to play aggressive, and that's what you needed. Because whenever you're timid against a team like Auburn, who has the shot blocking talent that they do, you're going to get swatted a lot. You have to go up strong. You have to go up with a purpose, and that's what they did. And if you see Alabama's bigs continue to play like this going forward, on top of the guards, because we know the guards are going to play better. The guards are going to have better games than what they had on Saturday. If you get the guards playing well, on top of the bigs playing with as much aggression as they did, this team's going to be really hard to beat offensively, and that's what they needed in this game, and they got it.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to touch on Grant a little bit, because we were up in the media section. We're kind of joking, just like, who is this guy and what did he do with Grant Nelson? Because of late, we've talked about it on the show, just Grant needs to show up. And it's March. I guess he saw the bat signal in the sky and decided to. And again, kind of what Blake was just talking about, the aggressive way that he played. He ends up with 23 points, 8 rebounds. You mentioned it, Tim, the Crimson Crane. Like, it was quick. I thought he was going to get teed up, but it was awesome to see just in that environment, to add to everything else that was going on, just the emotions. The crowd hated it, but the Alabama players loved it. But for Grant to play like that, I know he's been banged up. I think he got a little banged up in the Auburn game. But for him to play like that right now, I think is a great thing for Alabama moving forward if he can continue it. But just what did you think of that kind of – it's not a coming out party, but it's a Grant Nelson of old that we saw in Neville Arena this past weekend, Tim?
Yeah, he's always kind of flashed the game and shocked us and just taken over that situation. I don't know who motivated the bigs for Alabama, but someone, I don't know if they were watching Rocky or they're watching the speech in Any Given Sunday. Somebody found something, because Cliff yelling at the sky, pounding his chest, Grant hit the crane. And it wasn't really a taunt. It was really showing out what he did. Look what I did. And it happened so quick, I don't think anybody expected it. And I think the referee's just kind of like, whoa, what happened? Like we were, because I was kind of shocked he showed that kind of emotion, because he's a pretty subdued guy, pretty laid back with all that stuff. But an unbelievable performance. I think couple of the biggest things I noticed is he's hitting 3 in that game, which changes his whole dynamics of the game. But something else was, into regulation, making Broom. Now, there's not really a bad shot for that guy, but he gave him about as tough as look as he could to try to end that game at regulation. He kept him from getting to the basket, made him turn away and hit a little left-handed fall away. Jump shot to send it to overtime. So I thought defensively, I know Broom definitely had a good game offensively, but there was really good defensive play in the post on both sides, considering how well the offense was. But Grant was just, 10 out of 10 A+, and he's in lore. You'll never forget, even going off, the whole, I did think it was funny. I had all my friends really mad. They threw towels at us, and I was like, hand
Could be
towels.
worse.
These aren't beach towels. You know what I mean? They're just hand towels. Y'all relax. You ran over there, and I thought the whole thing. The funniest thing is when Mark went over there, the first guy to throw a towel was some old dude in the right corner. He just like flipped it, looked away, tried to be casual. And then I think Alabama kind of asked for it. But it is amazing. I mean, Grant's emotions. When you got a calm guy that's wild, it's kind of like my wife. When she's riled up, we're like the whole household's riled up. You know what I mean? Everybody's bouncing off the wall because she's the calm one. And I think Grant, pushed that. And same for Cliff. I think both of them pushed that momentum.
Yeah, they've embraced the rivalry. I mean, they're newer players. Grant's been around for a couple of years, and Cliff's in his first year, but they've embraced it. I think they know what it means. It's kind of crazy, though, the Crimson Crane, when you see the replays, that Bruce Pearl's kind of complaining, like, that's our thing. It's like, well, first of all, that comes from the
That's
Karate
insane.
Kid.
What is wrong with
I
y'all?
think he said that's taunting.
I don't know. I think
somebody had a bad lip read on that.
Look, when your
team
team goes out at halftime after a game and does the crane and does all the social media, I don't feel you can really gripe about it. I mean, Auburn's a demonstrative team. They're a little bit of a silly team. They should be. They're confident. They're good and all that stuff.
I think everybody should do more of that. I think it makes it more fun.
I think
we need more of that.
We need more celebration and less taunting. I have no issue with celebrating, which is what I think Grant did. I've got no issue when Broom does that. I don't think he's taunting the other team. I mean, for me, that was a Bruce. I've seen Bruce without his shirt on. So at a basketball game. So I don't want to hear, that should have been a T, if we're being honest.
The only person to blame is John Mechie. That's what it really boils down to. He's the one that's created this monster, and it still lives on.
Astray.
And it's crazy because like football doesn't really even do it much anymore. It's a basketball thing now.
But you got to remember, that was like some of these guys are older than Mechie. I looked it up. Auburn players are older than Mechie. Like Chad for
they're
sure.
older than Blake.
Blake's 13, so that's a low bar.
That's everybody's.
Yeah, that's a low bar. But I'm saying these guys were still in college when Mechie did it 11 years ago.
Right.
So it's still like so it's still fresh on their mind.
But going back to Grant for a little bit, Blake, Tim mentioned it. It's obviously he was aggressive. The dunk is what everybody's going to remember. But the fact that he went 3 of 6 from 3, I think it's the first time he's hit multiple threes since his huge game at Kentucky. That's been 2 months ago now. Just when he's playing like he did in Auburn, how tough is this team to beat?
It completely changes like everything about this team's offense because I think Nelson is a player who has struggled at times just with confidence, and you can visibly see when he plays with confidence and how like a switch flips with him, and his entire demeanor, his entire attitude changes, and he's talking to the opponent and like doing all this stuff that he doesn't do in a game where he's not playing super well or not confident. Like you can see it in him. So whenever he's able to stretch the defense out and hit a 3 and make people contest, that opens things up for him because a shot fake, he can blow by and get downhill. But then also it pulls people out from the lane, opens up driving lanes for other people just from a basketball standpoint of what that does for the offense. I went and looked. I was curious in his 2 seasons at Alabama. Alabama's 10-1 when he scores 20 points. And the one loss is Ohio State in the Emerald Coast Classic in November of last season. So like his first month on the team.
Right.
So you can see kind of the impact that it has whenever he has a big game. Alabama typically wins. And that's exactly what we saw in this past game. I mean, he wasn't even shooting the 3 like to start the game. He was
Mhm.
attacking the rim with force and going up strong and getting layups, and that kind of got him going. It was very similar to how it was at that Kentucky game 2 months ago. He would go up strong and he finished a couple shots around the rim, and then he stepped out and started hitting threes. And then it just kept going and spiraled from there. So he's shown the potential to be able to take over games. We've seen it multiple times before. We saw it in the Sweet 16 a year ago against North Carolina. That's the level that he's capable of playing at. And so whenever he does that, it makes this team entirely different.
Alabama now turns its attention to Nashville. They're up in Nashville already. They'll play on Friday night. It's going to be a late game. Alicia and I were out at dinner on Wednesday, and it was already after 8, and the game before the Oklahoma and Georgia game hadn't even ended yet. And I was like, my God, we're going to be at Bridgestone Arena until 2 a.m. Covering this matchup. But we don't know, like I said, who Alabama's going to play it. It's either going to be Kentucky or Oklahoma. Oklahoma beat Georgia in the first round. That second round matchup is going to be the late game on Thursday night. We're recording on Thursday morning. But when you look ahead to this SEC tournament, Tim, just from an Alabama perspective, just what do you think is the ideal scenario? Because we heard from Nate Oates on Wednesday. It's a logical question just because you want to be fresh for the NCAA tournament, and Alabama's going to be a 1 or 2 seed when the brackets are revealed this weekend. But they want to win the thing. They're trying to win the thing. That's the goal. Obviously, that's what you expect them to say, but I think it's very clear that that's the messaging to the players. But when we're sitting here talking just amongst the three of us, what do you think is an ideal scenario for Alabama when it goes up to Nashville?
I think the Auburn win has set us up in about as nice a scenario as you can get from an Alabama perspective, because if you've lost that game, if you've lost 3 in a row, and however many of your last however many, this kind of first game becomes a must-win game. I mean, it's not a must-win, but it feels like a must-win game. So I think that relaxation is at least setting in. You hope to get a little bit of Reed, and even 3 to 5 minutes this week would be a test to see, because he's missed. I mean, 8 minutes of Reed is better than no Reed. Reed's a good defender. He's a very active guy. Can help Mo D out a little bit right now too. He's still going through Ramadan, and that has to affect him to some degree. With what he's doing. But it could help him out because they kind of serve that same role. But I think the scenario that you've laid out is about as good as it's going to get. You like your first round matchup. You got 5 days off. And if you get to the Final Four, you're in the Final Four of the NCAA tournament. You're probably looking at Florida, Tennessee, and Auburn are going to be favored to get there. And if somebody beats one of those 3 teams or Alabama, it's going to be an NCAA tournament team. There's not going to be a 16 seed putting this thing in the finals, in my opinion. So,
there's
that
not
is
any left. So
that's
every team left is a tournament team.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You just went straight to the Sweet 16, basically, in some cases. I want to point out before we forget, the thing about Mark is he had 7 assists. Did he have 1 turnover or no turnovers? He had 2 turnovers. Wait, Mark had 1 turnover and 7 assists in that Auburn game. And we've consistently seen his assist total go up and his turnovers go down. So I do think that, of course, he hit the game-winning shot. I was going to go back to that. I meant to mention that earlier. But you want to consider to see Mark play that way, facilitate. He's actually doing better kind of off the ball as a lead, a facilitator than he was as that. So I think Mark's going to still carry this team. I still think you're looking at Aiden, you're looking at Mark, you're looking at Chris, you're looking at those guys to get the bulk of that. But if you can also get those bigs fired up, like you said, we're at that stage of basketball. It was, if we play this way, tough to beat, or if we play this way, easy to beat. That's where we're at for the rest of the season for every team in the country. So I'm pretty excited about this event. I was pretty pumped up yesterday.
We'll hit pause on the SEC tournament because I meant to talk about that shot from Mark Sears, because we've talked about it ad nauseum. He had 5 points going into overtime. He ends up with 9. He hit the biggest shot of the game to win it in Neville Arena. Just when you look at that ending, can you think of another Alabama game, at least from a regular season standpoint? Because we know what the postseason means. Winning championships, making it to the Final Four is a huge deal. But from a regular season standpoint, can you think of a bigger Alabama win going on the road against the number 1 team in the country? It's your arch rival. It's to end the regular season. Is there a better regular season win in your opinion, Tim?
I'm always going to go to that Florida game. One Petway backdoor, Shelton finding him, and for
That's fair.
that, Florida wasn't and also y'all are young. I'm not sure if y'all were born yet for that, but I was there. The crowd was crazy. He's a backdoor cut, running down, not a great set play. Petway, who's a fan favorite here as a player and as a coach, finishes that. He's wearing the ruby red shoes, looking like from the Wizard of Oz. That for me was the biggest because it also won the SEC. From a rivalry standpoint, this is by far the biggest. Didn't win the SEC. Can you imagine if Sears hit that to win the SEC?
Yeah.
I mean, that would definitely, without a single doubt, be the biggest shot in the history of Alabama basketball. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to forget this one either. I mean,
No.
when Petway did it, I mean, the only thing you can find is on YouTube, a blurry version of it. With Mark, we saw 70 angles of that shot. The shot itself, I was going to ask y'all, he pulled that pretty quick. He pulled that from the mid-range, the free throw line, even though he fell forward. I almost feel like there should have been another dribble there, more of a runner. I was curious because Mark kind of told Phelan, like, hold up, and the play went a little bit longer than maybe I expected. I'd be curious what Nate Oates would say if that was supposed to be. But Mark felt once he cleared that corner, good defender, got trapped a little bit, lost his way. He knew what he was doing. I was just curious why it was so, it originated from like 15 feet out, but to hit it and then go and do that's game. I mean, you got to practice that. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, that's an in front of the mirror moment. For
Yeah,
sure.
you got to. How's this going to? I mean, that's pretty clutch. I'd have never remembered if I hit that shot.
Yeah.
I'd have just laid to the floor and cried or something. You know what I mean?
I just ran around the arena. But no, it's Nato's talked about it after the game, and he said it was a bad play design that he drew up, and he thanked Mark for bailing him out. So I think, when you look back on it, Mark made the right call because it left his hand before the buzzer. There was no doubt. I know they went to the monitor, but they weren't there long. So it all worked out. But for you, Blake, what do you, at least of the Nate Oates era, it feels like the biggest win of the regular season. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it is. I think the Petway shot, that game kind of clears as far as, broader history goes because of the stakes involved and because it was to win a championship. This game didn't have a championship involved, but still you're on the road against the number one team in overtime on a buzzer beater, and that team also happens to be Auburn. So that just adds even more to it. Yeah. Oddly enough, this isn't Alabama's first win over a number one team on the road under Oates. It's not Mark Sears either, because they did it, 2 seasons ago against Houston. But that was also that was a huge win. That was a December game though. And so I'm going through my head thinking of big wins. When they went up to Seattle and beat Gonzaga, that was a really big win. But also that was a December game. These are big, monumental wins that count for something. But they don't have the same weight, it feels like, as a rivalry conference game to close the regular season in March. That kind of elevates it. On top of the fact that, that Gonzaga game was huge, but it wasn't against number one and it wasn't on a buzzer beater. All of these factors just kind of elevate it for me. So I feel like it's up there. I feel like it has a pretty good argument to be number one. I'd probably put it number one, at least under Nate Oates. Yeah. So it's just so many things about that specific game. Also the fact that it was back and forth the whole time. It wasn't the game itself was exciting and fun, and you had lead changes, and you had some moments where it looked like Alabama could pull away. You had some moments where it looked like Auburn could pull away, and it being a road game, just all of that. It's number one in the regular season under Oates for me.
At the end of regulation too, sorry, Charlie, you had a missed 3, offensive rebound, kick the broom, and a 3 to tie it. I mean, you had the maximum amount of drama when you go and break this down. And that's what I did. I kind of rewatched it, and I was doing it in 5-minute, 10-minute segments based on my time. When you watch it, the kid Pettiford must have hit 2 monster shots. Phelan late, coming in the second half, made some monster shots. But even then, if Bama gets that board, all of a sudden you're shooting free throws with a chance to go up 2 possessions. But instead, Pettiford run down his own shot, kicked it around, and Broom a clutch 3 to even set up that play. So you're right, Blake. It was back and forth, amazing. amazing level of basketball.
It's a game where, yes, that shot from Sears is going to be replayed a ton, but when you think about like next season, when we're sitting in Coleman Coliseum for the season opener, there's going to be at least just 2, 3, 4 moments from that game, probably in the pregame video. Like it's a game that they're going to remember for a while, and I'm glad we were there to watch it in person because it was a lot of fun. But going back to the SEC tournament, I'll ask you the same question I asked Tim Blake. Just what do you think is the ideal scenario, or maybe not ideal? What's a realistic scenario for Alabama going up to Nashville, potentially playing Kentucky in the first round? We'll find out again later tonight. But what do you think is a realistic scenario for Alabama?
I think realistic, win the first game, and then from there you kind of see what happens. I think Alabama will be favored on Friday night, whether it's against Kentucky or Oklahoma. And both of those teams, Alabama hasn't lost to either. They've beaten Kentucky twice. They've beaten Oklahoma once back in the SEC opener in early January. With Kentucky, it is hard to beat a team 3 times, but, Kentucky is also a little hobbled. They won't have Jackson Robinson for, I think, the rest of the season, which does affect them and their ceiling and their offense and everything like that. So Alabama they will be favored in the first game. From there, you might play Florida. You might play a Missouri team that gave you hell the last time you played them. And then in the championship, who knows? You could see an Auburn. You could see a Tennessee. There's no telling. So really just getting to that semifinal Saturday, I think if you lose to Florida, so be it. I think Florida's a really good team, and there's no shame in that. And then if you do, you get an extra couple days of rest. But at the same time, there is value in winning a championship. There is value in winning 3 games in a row, and the confidence that builds for a team. I know it's very easy to compare, the 2 times they won the SEC tournament under Oates, they lost in the Sweet 16. And then the time that last year when they lost the first game, they went to the Final Four. But it's not really a 1-to-1, I don't think, because you go back 3 years ago in 2022, they lost the opener in the SEC tournament, and then they lost the first round of the NCAA tournament to Notre Dame. And then you look even further back in 2019, Auburn won the SEC tournament, and that spurred them on to go to the Final Four because of the momentum that they built on that run. It's different in every scenario. There's not a pure answer. It's different by team. So I think obviously the thing you want to do is win the games, go and win 3 games in Nashville, hoist a trophy, raise a banner, and then go carry that momentum into the NCAA tournament if you're able to do that.
One thing that Nadeau's talked about on Wednesday is just kind of guys he wants to see more from going into this tournament, guys he wants to see step up. And I know that kind of started with Blake's question about Aiden Holloway, and that's one guy, but he also mentioned Jaron Stevenson and Mo Diabate. So, Tim, do you agree with those 3? Do you have another guy in mind when you just look at guys that you kind of need to have a little bit more from going into this SEC tournament?
Yeah, I think some of what you're seeing with the struggles is the elite defenders they're playing. I mean, that's something else. I said this on the roundtable, the BOL message board. They said Alabama's struggling down the stretch. No, the stretch was causing the struggle.
Yeah.
Had that been the first 7 games of the year, if you flip those 7s, Bama's friggin' come. What would they have been based on the first 7 games if that had been the last 7? They were 6-1, 7-0, something like that. They'd have thought they were hot. They were playing elite level teams, especially defensively. Tennessee's a menace. Auburn's a pest. They know how to defend. And so I think that played. Florida's an excellent basketball team. So I think that played into some of the guard play, because all those had pretty good guard play, right? Those are pretty good scoring guards. You got to worry about you got to worry about defending them, and then they're pretty good defenders. So I think Aiden's going to be fine. I think he's going to get his shot. I don't think he forced. I was pretty excited not to see guys used to scoring forcing shot, because they could have, instead of go with the flow of the game, I think they could have forced it and said, I got to get mine. Aiden took 5 shots, had a couple assists. That's tempting to just start chucking them up there, but they played with whatever the game plan was. I don't worry about anybody, because I remember last year there was always somebody stepping up in some Rocky type hero role out of the blue. Jaron certainly has that in him. We've seen it this year a couple of times already. We've seen it last year. There's going to be matchups, and there's enough talent that somebody can step up you're not used to. But the key to me is just to get your main guys, keep your main guys the main guys, and then hope everything else falls in place. And again, Reed, if he can play, and he wants to play, the guy wants to play. He's a competitor. He gives everything he's got. That's a little bit of a, you get him in just a few minutes this week, and I don't know if he's playing yet or not. It seemed positive, but get him in a few minutes, and then, get him a week rest, and then get him in a little bit more in that first round. You can work him into play in shape. I have a lot of, real quick, I have a lot of friends, older obviously, who say it takes a while to get into play in shape. It's not when you're 18, all right? At our age, yes, it takes a friggin' long. We go pick up, yeah, we're talking a year and a half, to get where we can run a full court basketball game. These guys are 18, 19-year-old with great coaching staff, trainers, and everything else. So hoping the best for Reed.
Yeah, it does sound positive. I think Natos has kind of been leading up to that. And like you said, though, he doesn't need a ton of minutes, but everybody's like, well, rest him for the NCAA tournament. Well, wouldn't you like to get him some minutes before the NCAA tournament and have him more ready to go then? I think that's the ideal situation there. But you mentioned it, like, with guys like Jaren and Modi, they both had huge games last year in the NCAA tournament. You look at the Grand Canyon game with Modi. I don't think they win that game without Modi's performance. Jaren against Clemson was huge. So I think Nato's talking about those guys specifically kind of has that in mind. And I think that they can deliver. And Blake mentioned it earlier, just the way that Jaren looked attacking the basket at Auburn look different. And if he continues to do that, and a lot of these guys, what they did well and what they've done well of late isn't just some switch that was flipped. They're kind of minor things. And if they can keep that up, I think it'll be big. But when you look at it, like, I know you're the one that asked Nate about Aiden. Is it him that's the top of your list, or do you kind of agree with all three, or is there somebody else that you think needs to step up going into Nashville?
Aiden's at the top of my list because whenever you have Sears is playing well. I know he didn't score a ton against Auburn, but he still played well. And Philon's been playing really well lately. If you have Sears, Philon, and Holloway all on at the same time, like, that's pretty deadly as far as this offense goes. And Holloway's been limited the last two games, and I think kind of the length of both Florida and Auburn have gotten to him. He wasn't super great in the first Auburn game either. But Oates mentioned a couple of things that they can be doing, running more actions for him, the ball moving a little better to get him better looks. He was on a tear throughout SEC play. This was the first time he's gone back-to-back games in single digits since back in December. So that just tells you how consistent he's been scoring the ball and as a shooter. And their bigs were really good against Auburn, and they didn't need to make a ton of threes, but in some games you're going to need to shoot the three well, especially if you get matched up with Kentucky, because that's another team that can score the ball at a really high clip. So you're going to need Holloway to have a big game because he's statistically your best three-point shooter. He's shooting 42% on the year. So I think getting him going will be really big, and also you want to have a guard like Holloway, your best shooter, feeling it a little bit and having a good rhythm and confidence about him going into the NCAA tournament, because that's really important there. I didn't think he looked not confident against Auburn. He did hit a big shot in the second half with Alabama. I think up one, they got a rebound, and he pushed it in transition and pulled a transition three, I think with Pettiford in his face, and hit it, which put Alabama from up one to up four, which was a huge point in the game and gave them a little bit bigger of a lead there. So it's not like he's not playing confident. He just couldn't get a ton going throughout the majority of the game. But getting him going will be big going forward.
We'll get out of here on this. I know it's been a popular topic on the BOL roundtable, but seeding for the NCAA tournament. We'll obviously know what the bracket looks like on Sunday evening. I know everybody's excited for that. I've had my nephew just jump into he created like a family group chat, and like people that don't even watch basketball. He's like,
bet you love that. I bet you love that.
It's so demeaning because he's like, I know what's going on. Charlie knows what's going on. Everybody else figure it out. And I'm like, okay, kid, let's dial it back a little bit. But people are excited. And when you look at it, Alabama right now is on the 2 seed line. A lot of people have them the number 1 overall 2 seed at the 5 overall. Some people have the 6, but there's room to move, I think. Obviously, the win over Auburn has people wondering, can they move up to the 1 seed line? So I'm going to ask you guys, just we don't know the odds or anything like that, but in your mind, what are the chances and what does Alabama need to do to get up to that 1 seed line? Is it just one win in Nashville? They need to win a couple. Do they need to win the whole thing? What do you think, Tim?
I think it's a minimum of 2, right? You want to add that. You want to add that elite. I mean, again, these are very elite top 4 seeds. I mean, the first round game is going to be an NCAA tournament team that we pointed out. I think you need to win 2, assuming the second one's against Florida. Florida's probably a little bit ahead of Alabama because of that head-to-head win in Tuscaloosa. Win it all, I think you're certainly a 1 seed. It'd be hard for me. I mean, there's no guarantees. It'd be hard for me not to see them as a 1 seed because you're probably going through some version of Tennessee, Auburn, Georgia, 2 of those 3 teams, if it's chalk, if it's favorites. To me, that this tournament's kind of like, we're now kind of like playing with house money because of the Auburn win. Can't go lower than 2. We know that for a fact because I'm not sure, again, had you lost Auburn, had you lost his first round game, that it would have been a certain 2 spot, right? I think it's probably likely, but I think there'd have been some nervous energy. After the Florida loss, we had a lot of people saying 4 or 5 seed. I thought they were going to fall out of the rankings. I mean, I was like, whoa, I'm not sure we're going to be in is the NIT still around? I'm Googling at the moment. But I think this team's house money, and I think they're feeding off an unbelievable win. You lose, you get extra rest. That's a win. You win it all, you get a possible 1 seed. That's a win. So to me, it's a win-win where they're at. You definitely want a 1 seed, but I mean, there's not, a 2, 8 and 9s in this tournament are going to be really good. So it's not like, hey, 8 and 9s are going to be easier than, 10 and 7s. You're going to be staring at a possible UConn or somebody in that second round. So, I mean, it's the tournament. You played every game to win, but to me, it's house money win. It's a win-win situation either way.
I kind of feel like the same people that, saw the world falling after the Florida loss and were claiming that they were going to fall to a 4 or 5 seed are the same ones thinking that the Auburn win will propel them to the 1 seed line. I think that's why I asked the question. Yeah. Because, I know Nate Oates got asked about it after the game, and it's kind of a little bit of a head-scratching question because, yes, it's a huge win. You're beating the number 1 team in the country, but the teams that are on the 1 seed line right now are really damn good. And just to move up like that, I think is a little crazy. I think I'm in agreement. I think it takes a couple of wins. I don't think you just get 1 and move up unless just chaos everywhere else happens. And I don't see that being likely, but you never know. What about you, Blake? Is it 2? Do you need to win the whole thing to get to the 1 seed line? Where's your head at for that?
I think if they win the whole thing, then they will get a 1 seed. I think if they win 2, then there's a chance. It's interesting because usually when you're talking about moving seed lines, like not to make the tournament, but just moving up and down seed lines, the SEC and conference tournaments in general don't bear a ton of weight. But this is a really unique situation whenever your 3 primary competitors for the last 1 seed are all in the same conference and they're all competing in the same tournament. And so Alabama, Florida, and Tennessee, how those 3 teams do here in Nashville is pretty much going to decide who gets that 1 seed and then who's the top 2 and the second 2 after that. I think Florida, pretty consensus, has the lead right now. Florida is the last 1 seed in the majority of brackets. And then I think after that, it's pretty much Alabama and then Tennessee. So that's kind of your order. And we have to see how this plays out going forward. It would be nice if Alabama got to play Florida on Saturday and got a win over them. That would be a big boost. And we got to see what Tennessee does. But watching those 3 teams and how they perform is going to determine what they end up being. And I think if they win it, they'll get the 1 seed. 2 wins, and one of those wins is over Florida, but then they lose on Sunday. It's going to be really close. We'll have to wait and see.
Should be a lot of fun. I know Blake and I will be up in Nashville to cover it. Get some locker room access, so a little bit more behind the scenes look. But stay locked into BamaOnLine.com. If you haven't already, if you haven't signed up for BOL yet, we have a great promo, just $1 for your first week. That'll obviously get you through this. There's some spring practice starting back up next week. It's a busy time of year. Recruiting never stops too. We know all these guys do a great job covering recruiting. But if you've listened this long, be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We greatly appreciate it. If you're listening via podcast, give us a 5-star review and a rating. Again, greatly appreciate it. But until then, we'll see you guys on the next show to preview the NCAA tournament. We are here. March is here. This is March. We'll see you guys on the next show.